Hey everyone, welcome to Social Studies. Let's kick us off with a bell ringer, bringing us back to what we learned last week. So, number one, what was the Cold War? Hopefully this is a term by now that you know. You've seen it quite a bit. It was a war that was cold, meaning us and the Soviet Union really don't like each other. We're very cold towards one another. However, as you learned, we really haven't ever fought yet or will fight. So you're going to see we don't ever actually go to war with the Soviet Union. That's why it gets called the Cold War. So it's this 50-year time period of tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. And if you remember, the United States is democracy and capitalism, and the Soviet Union was pushing communism, right? So the Cold War is a 50-year time period really between communism and democracy. And what was America's policy in the Cold War? If you remember, America's policy with the Cold War was containment. We were going to stop the spread of communism. We were going to contain it. We weren't going to try to get rid of it, but we were going to at least contain it. We couldn't let it spread. What evidence do you have of this? There was a couple different things that America did. If you remember, we had the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan gave aid to countries in Europe to rebuild. We also had the Truman Doctrine, and the Truman Doctrine specifically gave money to like Turkey and Greece. But both of them was giving aid and giving money to rebuild over in Europe. So that way, hopefully, all of those countries could resist communism and ultimately keeping our policy of containment. We did not want communism to spread, which really kind of leads us into today's lesson. So today we're going to talk about these two organizations. So by the end of the day today, you should be able to define and describe NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Well, NATO is a North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was like United States, France, Britain, West Germany, and it's for capitalism, right? So NATO is all about stopping the spread of communism. They are all about containment. So then what do you think the Warsaw Pact is? Well, the Soviet Union was like, well, if you're going to have a pact to stop the spread of communism, we're going to have a pact to spread it. So we get the Warsaw Pact, which is the Soviet countries, the USSR, and all countries controlled by the USSR. And their goal is to push communism, which kind of makes sense, right? Like, if someone says, hey, you got my back, right, and you hear him say that, you're going to think to someone else, boy, I should probably do something about it, right? So that's what happens with NATO. We form NATO, and so then the Soviet Union says, well, we're going to form the Warsaw Pact. So just NATO stops the spread of communism, or at least tries, and the Warsaw Pact is trying to spread it, all right? So the Cold War just keeps getting colder. Right? No one's coming to the table to talk about their problems. They all just keep doing things behind the scene. This is going to lead in America to this thing called the Red Scare. The Cold War increased many Americans' fear of communist subversion. Many Americans feared that communists had penetrated American society and were weakening our government. This led to massive attempt to uncover communists. So this time period, since it's a Cold War, we start to get really worried that somehow our country is going to become communist. So if someone is like an anarchist, which means they're against the government, during this time period, people are like, no, like that person's evil, they're horrible, they're bad, because we were just so afraid that something was going to happen with communists. So this time period really gets called the Red Scare. And it's where pretty much everyone was looking around for communists. Specifically, we get this guy right here. Let me scroll down. This is Senator Joseph McCarthy. He kind of loses it during this time. But people buy into his beliefs and his theories, and it gets called McCarthyism. He pretty much had everybody paranoid that their neighbor was a communist spy. We had people during this time period, like watching their neighbors, thinking they lived some like double life. And this really all goes under the Red Scare that everyone was so scared that somehow our country was going to flip to communism. So the two big things that you really are talking about today are NATO and the Warsaw Pact, and then the Red Scare. So what you're going to do is you're going to read through these documents right here, answer these questions on these things. Some interesting little facts down here when you get to the bottom about the Red Scare, just kind of neat things. And at the bottom, What is the Red Scare? Answer in a complete paragraph. And when you are done with that, make sure you participate in your class discussion. And as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to message your teachers. Keep up the good work. You are doing awesome.